Well, hey, good afternoon and welcome to today's webinar. I'm your host, Dave Sobush, Director of Research and Policy with the Florida College Access Network. Thank you so much for joining us today. We have got a great agenda focused on high-value pathways that lead to meaningful credentials and careers. We're going to start with a national perspective on a framework for how states can align education workforce systems and what Florida can learn. We'll then bring it home and reveal the key findings from our statewide career pathways baseline assessment, including what's working, where gaps exist, and what students and families need most. Then, some very exciting news as we introduce FCAN's new Talent Strong Florida High Value Pathways Initiative. It's an effort to strengthen regional career pathways ecosystems, and we will announce a competitive funding opportunity for Florida communities ready to design and implement high value career pathways strategies in their region. For those just getting to know FCAN, we're passionate about ensuring every Floridian can achieve an education beyond high school and a rewarding career. We partner with the state on the Sail to 60 goal, strengthening alignment between industry and learning to reach 60% post-secondary attainment, whether that's a degree, workforce credential, or industry certification, among Floridians aged 25 to 64 by the year 2030. We've made some real progress towards that goal. Our most recent calculation put the state at 55.2% attainment. That's 46.9% degrees and 8.3% with workforce credentials or industry certifications. Recently released data shows that Florida's degree attainment increased half a percentage point from 2023 to 2024. And hot off the presses this morning, we have county level degree attainment data to share. On the left are the top 10 counties by degree attainment, and on the right are the counties with the largest percentage point gains from 2023 to 2024. FCAN will be releasing our attainment profiles within the next 2 weeks for everyone to see and share their county's progress. We help the state at FCAN and its communities move toward our workforce and talent goal through research, advocacy, storytelling, and by supporting the amazing local networks and initiatives across our state. Today's webinar touches the highlighted activities in particular. FCAN's work is guided by our 7 conditions for success, which are listed here, and you can find out more about on our website. Conditions highlighted, again, are central to our session today. Webinar attendees, hey, that's you viewers out there, are in for a treat today as we have 3 great speakers lined up for you. Adriana Harrington of Excel in Ed is a senior policy advisor focused on workforce alignment and post-secondary value. She's going to explore how states are using policy to strengthen career pathways and what's working across the country. Dr. Carrie Henderson of TSG Advisors is a career pathways strategist and advisor to state and regional education systems nationwide. Dr. Henderson's going to share some insights from Florida's Career Pathways baseline assessment, and we'll also discuss national best practices in building education to career alignment. Last but certainly not least, my FCAN colleague, the amazing Dr. Kimberly Krupa, who leads our network engagement and communications, is going to share details about an exciting new high-value pathways initiative and funding opportunity for communities. We love hearing your questions, so please drop them in the dashboard anytime during the conversation. If you're on social media, join the discussion using pound FCAN and pound Talent Strong Florida, or find us at Florida FL College Access. And don't worry if you miss anything, you'll get the recording and materials from this webinar within 1 week. With that, I'm going to invite Adriana Harrington to enter the Zoom and share her latest research. The floor is yours. Take it away.
Thank you so much, Dave, and wonderful to meet everyone. As Dave mentioned, I am the managing director at Excel in Ed, which was founded by Florida's Governor Bush about 15 years ago. And as an organization, we work across the policy spectrum, and I lead our college and career pathways team. And we are focused at the state level in terms of statute, rules, regs, policy, thinking about what is happening at the Department of Education, higher education, and in the legislature. All of the resources that I'm going to share and talk about today can be found on pathwaysmatter.org. And what I am going to go over is a policy framework that gives a kind of archetype for how to think about what undergirds a strong college and career pathway. I really appreciate that FCAN uses the terminology rewarding career. At ExcelinEd, we are in strong alignment of we want what happens to learners to be right, to have options, to be flexible, and to ultimately drive towards that's really life sustaining for them and their families, and in the best interest of employers and the economy, and kind of creating momentum within a state. So we released this fall a tool called pathwaysmatter.org, which breaks down the 45 policies that go into the incredibly complex navigation of learners going from K-12 into post-secondary, be it an industry recognized credential, technical, 2-year, 4-year, and then on into the workforce and then back again if needed. So we think there's kind of 4 foundational policies that really undergird a state or a region's ability to think about a high quality pathway for a learner. The first one is governance. Are the right folks at the table to help make decisions, drive priorities, align funding? It can be really complicated for a learner if you're hearing one thing when you're in K-12 and then post-secondary is something totally different. So kind of aligning that on the structural side. The second one is data, which I know is a joint kind of passion with FCAN, in making sure that we're looking at the data, what's happening to learners, sharing it back, doing what we call a return on investment analysis, and thinking about the decision making there. Putting a stake in the ground around quality at a regional, at a state level kind of really creates that North Star and gives a ability to think about, well, what does matter to us and where are we putting our priorities? And then credentials of value. And we define a credential as anything after high school in terms of industry recognized up through a 4-year degree. But how are we sending signals to learners around what matters and giving them the opportunity to kind of explore and get that career awareness to be able to have accurate information to make that decision? The rest of the framework is 45 policies that kind of break down the actual policy levers that can be pulled to strengthen. So that includes, right, we think about getting college credit while in high school, CTE programs, work-based learning. The framework kind of breaks down and looks at each individual piece for a state. We've also mirrored it on the college side. You'll notice we folded credentials in, but thinking about what is happening in education in higher ed for funding that's available for learners, or how is your credit articulating? If you get a credit in high school, do you actually get college credit for it? And then we specifically call out employers because we know they are such an important part of this narrative. And really hard, really, really hard. So it's kind of a burgeoning area of Pathways Matter, but just making sure that employers are at the table, that we're thinking about them as we're going through policy is super important. So on Pathways Matter, you can click on each of these 45 and it will pull up a map. We are working our way through the 50 states in the US. But Florida was one of the ones that we did in the first round of 20 states. So you'll see here, this is what would happen if you clicked on an ROI analysis. Here, Florida is yellow, and I'll go into that more in just a second, but this kind of gives you an interactive sense of like, where is Florida sitting nationally in different areas across the framework? And then the red, yellow, green is based on a rubric. We set the bar high on purpose because we think it should be feasible yet aspirational, especially for those foundational four. We really honed in on that cross sector piece of the work. But if you're thinking like, I wonder why it's red, yellow, or green, we have the full back end rubric available for folks to walk through. Here is the Florida takeaway across all 45. Florida is on the leading edge nationally. It has one of the highest numbers of green in terms of where it's sitting across our rubric. The industry certification tiered list we flagged as an exemplar nationally, which means it's a little star. But areas for continued improvement, continued growth, 13 yellow and 8 red. Especially in those foundational four. Florida has a lot of amazing work happening, but the cross-sector nature of the work makes it really, really hard. And so noticing that is an area where Florida is all yellow because there's just pretty much all states are yellow across all of these to get the kind of the drive and the momentum and the continuous improvement. So I wanted to go over one kind of low-hanging fruit policy opportunity that we think Florida or Florida regions could explore, and then one longer-term one, which is the ROI. So a couple of states, including Ohio, Georgia, are thinking about direct admissions, which is the concept that every single student in the state gets a letter with the institutions that they are admitted to. It's a kind of a behavioral economics approach, right? Because in most states, students are pretty much already in to community colleges, especially their local community colleges, and then they might have the GPA or what's needed for more of a flagship university back end transcript. But it's a way of kind of building that college going momentum, either 2-year technical, 4-year, where students receive information saying you're already in. This is streamlined for you. Arkansas is pairing it with a common application system, which they didn't have before. Florida has that top 20 guaranteed admissions, which is amazing, but a direct admission program would just expand the concept out nationally, not nationally, statewide, where you're able to think about where could you see yourself as a student, and then knowing what the next steps are to make that a reality. Georgia is one of the early states who piloted the direct admissions, did the automation of sending out all of the letters to the high school seniors. They saw technical college applications increase by 26%. Then obviously there was a drop off in terms of who actually enrolled, but I think still good positive momentum with 9%. And similarly for the University of Georgia, increase in applications and increase in enrollment. So it's a policy that really has the ability to drive pretty meaningful change for learners. And then the larger bucket policy opportunity, which we talk about with pretty much every state that we talk to as an organization, is that return on investment. So what happens to learners after they graduate K-12 or post-secondary in terms of the bucket of employment, enrollment, and enlistment? And how is that information, one, being shared back to learners for decision making? How is the state leveraging those pieces of information for decision making, and institutions in K-12 in terms of what they're offering, how they're offering it, and additional supports that are needed? Florida's CTE audit is well on the way, right? This is from the 2024 CTE audit, which is the newer version, I believe, being implemented in 26, where targets are being set in terms of continuing education, concentrator rate, right? Like really powerful information. But we do think that the ability to share this back to learners is a tremendous opportunity for Florida. Really hard to do, but really important to be thinking through, especially with the counseling and where learners are going. Um, and then the data infrastructure that's behind it. How is it being leveraged, and is there anything that needs to be built up in the longitudinal data system to kind of continue to push this ROI work in Florida going. Florida was one of the first states to put its stake in the ground in 2019, right, with the executive order from Governor DeSantis, but continuing to iterate and draw on this data is going to be really important. Here's how we think about the ways in which an ROI can be used. We think about it in the buckets of transparency, right? How is this information being shared? Really important opportunity for Florida. The structural side, how are you removing programs? How are you eliminating programs? How are you beefing up programs? Where do folks need more money? I know that when the audit first came out, 500 CTE programs, right? This is a huge, massive shift. Are we still seeing that iteration of the data being used to really make change in what's happening? Incentivizing, right? So you're going to have the carrot, you have the stick in terms of where are we driving change? Florida, the post-secondary does have the outcomes-based funding. So really interesting in thinking about what's happening there. And then in K-12, you have it for individual like AP incentives, but could we think larger around like a bundle of opportunities that could be incentivized? And then like Arkansas is actually going to remove state funds for programs that aren't meeting benchmarks, similar to the way that the federal government is. So kind of really powerful opportunities on leveraging the ROI data. Which I did want to bring up the federal role in higher education accountability because I think it's happening. And Florida is really well poised to push further than what the federal government is requiring and be a national leader in terms of higher education accountability and driving that change. So the final rules just came out in January of this year, January 9th. And it's a new earnings premium. So they are going to require institutions by degree program to do what they're calling a do no harm test. So are you, as an institution, for the degree, if someone completes for 4 years, do they make more money than someone who just has a high school diploma? I can go into the nitty-gritty back end of this calculation with any of you on a side call if you want. But it's a kind of the floor, right? In thinking about holding higher ed accountability, but the federal government is putting some heft behind it. If the degree program fails 2 out of 3 years, they no longer are eligible for Title IV HEA funds, Pell not included. Florida could be thinking about running these calculations early, thinking about where the weaknesses are in the system. And if there's programs that have social value that have a low wage, what are larger conversations that need to be happening in terms of maybe getting like those wages up, early childhood, mom of three, like how are we thinking about those in the larger economic system? But I think it's really important that this is coming, and so Florida should be thinking about that in with its outcomes-based funding and that kind of larger ROI narrative. And then the example I wanted to share here, which I think is fascinating. So Virginia has a dashboard, the College and Career Outcomes website. I don't love this graph. I think it's very confusing, but if you click on it, you can see different pieces for each of the, like, where do folks go, right? Like taking the federal baseline and going higher, like what actually happens if you have a social studies degree? Where do you end up? But they're pulling LinkedIn data into this because the question always is, how do we know, right? You have enhanced UI wage data, really important. Florida on the leading edge there. Um, but there's still a lag, a lack of information. This is kind of my end food for thought. Like Virginia is pulling the information out of LinkedIn. I know it's not totally comprehensive, but I do think it's another unique way of thinking about the data and what's available, and how it can be shared. And if someone cracks that nut of like getting information into the hands of students, I think that would be really transformational. So that is all I had for today. Thank you so much for the opportunity.
Adriana, thank you so much for sharing that important research. Certainly a lot for us to think about in the state. And as you say, Florida has done so many great things in the arena of pathways and accountability. More and better data is always wanted. That may be a little biased coming from a director of research, but please stick around for our Q&A following Dr. Henderson's presentation. So with that, Carrie, I'm going to turn it over to you. The Zoom is yours.
Excellent. Thank you. And good afternoon, everyone. It's a pleasure to be with you today. As Dave said, my name is Carrie Henderson, and I'm a managing advisor at TSG Education Advisors. We are an education consulting firm with a home base in Tallahassee, but we work with colleges, systems, philanthropy, workforce entities all across the state. And some work nationally, really focused on student access and student success. And so I'm really excited to share with you some of the work that we did with FCAN, really trying to answer the question, how does Florida define high value pathways? And so what I'd like to do just over the next few minutes that we have is lay out kind of a framework for understanding career pathways. I like to think that we all, when we hear the word pathways, have a different idea in our mind about what that word means. And then when you add career pathways to it, there can be some confusion about like what are career pathways. And so what I wanted to start with are just some initial kind of features of career pathways so that we're all starting from the same baseline as to what we're talking about when we're talking about high value pathways. And so a lot of the work that FCAN has done is really focused, importantly so, on that high school population transitioning, matriculating into post-secondary. When we think about career pathways, we think about that pathway from high school, but we also think about multiple entry points. So the idea that individuals across all different types of systems and settings are able to access post-secondary education beyond a high school, whether that be through adult education, through military, through traditional higher education, apprenticeship, TANF. So this idea that individuals, wherever they are in life, may have access to an education system and a workforce system that's going to help them increase their skills and competencies. So one of the key features of career pathways is having multiple entry points. And then when we look at career pathways further, it really is about increasing skills and competencies and building multiple exit points for students and for learners. And so credentials are incredibly important, and many current occupations require a post-secondary credential, whether that be a certification, a certificate, or traditional associate or bachelor's degrees. But we know from the employer perspective, there are lots of discussions around still needing students to have the skills that are needed, both technical skills in that particular occupation, and then also things like employability skills. So the idea with career pathways includes increasing skills and competencies in that component of whatever the student is studying. And so career pathways can take many forms, and part of the feature is that they are designed to have multiple exit points. And so an individual may start by enrolling in a short-term training program that results in a certification, and later on decide to go back and complete a certificate from a local college for that purpose. And so the idea behind a career pathway that's cohesive is that those are clear to the student from an advising perspective along the way. And then the last note before we move on is an essential feature of career pathways is that there are well-connected and transparent education, training, and supports. So certainly the education and training components ensuring that what institutions are offering are going to meet the demands that the state has and the region has. But the supports piece is just as important. And so we know that a lot of time what is happening outside of the classroom is going to affect how a student performs inside the classroom. And so one of the features around career pathways is ensuring that those supports are kind of built in as part of the career pathway. This is going to become this graphic hopefully helpful as we move along in the discussion today. And so, I just kind of covered those essential features of career pathways, and we sort of think about them in two lenses. There is certainly the statewide career pathway system, and Adriana spoke about some of those features. I'm going to share some of those features as well. So those are really the state supports, the infrastructure, programs, funding, ways that the state is supporting career pathways. And incredibly importantly are the local and the regional career pathway system. And so we know to meet students where they are, there needs to be individuals within the community doing that work. And so part of career pathways is recognizing that local context. State context is definitely important, but the local context is especially important as we think about connecting students and parents to high value pathways. So that's just the high level overview. When we say career pathways, kind of what do we mean? So with that kind of background, I'm going to cover 5 elements of career pathways. And these are at a very high level. There's additional context we'd be happy to provide. But these are sort of if you were going to do a checkbox of what are components of career pathways, we would want to make sure that these are covered. And so the first is workforce alignment. And this is incredibly important, especially as you're talking about things like a CTE audit and whether or not workforce programs continue to exist. The idea is that the workforce, what business and employers actually need, is driving the conversation around what education and training providers are providing. And so the idea is that education and training providers are working hand in hand to align with industry and ensure that their offerings not only are meeting the needs of a particular region at a certain point in time, but also looking at the data on a regular basis to make sure that there is still a demand. Particularly now in the age of AI, we know that a lot of the jobs that we currently have are going to be evolving, and there may be jobs that are going to exist in 2 years that we haven't thought of. And so career pathways is really going to be driven by industry, and education and training sort of needs to keep up and to flex so that the workforce has what it needs to meet the local needs. And so that's kind of one important component of career pathways. Another component, which I alluded to a moment ago, is collaboration. And so this is a very busy graphic, but what I'd like to maybe focus on first is what's in the center of the graphic. And that is the learner or the participant. And that could be a student, or it could be a parent that is seeking access to public benefits and is then connected with resources that are going to help them obtain training to earn a livable wage and have family sustaining wages. But the idea behind career pathways is we're focusing in on the learners and the participants, and then all of the systems that exist, the entities, whether they be public, private, governmental, the workforce system. So thinking about workforce boards in Florida, that's career source boards, as well as public agencies, training providers, thinking about the role that business and industry has in identifying what the needs are, and employers also in connecting with specific opportunities to employ workers. And so I like to kind of start with this collaboration to really focus in on that learner participant has to interact with all of these pieces at some point in time. And at first, it's a lot to sort of process as to how all of this works together. And in Florida, and it was alluded to earlier, Adriana did with the Emergency Order 1931, but then also subsequently the REACH Act, House Bill 1507 that was passed in 2021. Florida is moving in a direction of having more alignment and more collaboration at the state level. And I think it's really important when we think about the work of local college access networks to think about how they interface with the ecosystem that exists and ensure that LPNs are ready and equipped to lend a hand and connect the learners and participants with the different resources that exist. The third element related to career pathways is the use of data. And there are a lot of data sources in Florida. And I have just put on the screen a few examples of those data sources. The Florida Insight Dashboard, which is through the Department of Commerce. CareerSource Florida has a dashboard that is a career ladder identifier and financial forecaster, a CLIF dashboard. The university system has a My Florida Future dashboard that looks at identifying what individuals who earn certain credentials, what they make once they enroll and earn credentials and are ultimately employed. And then the local targeted occupation list. So data at the local level about the occupations that are expected to be most in demand. And what I would say is this is by no means a comprehensive list of all of the data that are available. And a key component of career pathways is using data to inform programmatic decisions, to inform training and ways that students should be connected to programs of study that result in a high value credential. And I think what you'll see, and I'm alluding to it, is a lot of times this is overwhelming. Each dashboard represents a different data point. And so trying to understand how to use it and to navigate it is definitely, I think, an area of opportunity. But Florida is really fortunate with our longitudinal data systems and the work of the REACH Act that is still underway to bring more coherence to data systems to make it easier to digest and understand, and most importantly, to make it actionable. When we think about going to college and being advised about a particular program of study, having data on what the outcomes are can help students make informed decisions. The fourth piece of career pathways elements are what we call stackable credentials. And Florida has a very strong infrastructure within the secondary and post-secondary career and technical education space. So the school districts, the technical colleges, and the state college system. There are a lot of stackable credentials that are already embedded in how the state sets up its curriculum frameworks. A lot of times, again, we hear the word stackability, and maybe we all have different definitions of what that means. So we look at it in three perspectives. The first is vertical stacking. So when we think about students progressing from one level to another, so from a certificate degree to an associate degree to a bachelor's degree. So for example, they earn a CNA and then they go back to earn an LPN, an RN, and then ultimately a BSN. That is vertical stacking. And so oftentimes when people think stackable credentials, they're thinking about having a certificate fold into an associate and a bachelor's degree. And certainly Florida has a lot of existing articulation mechanisms that allow for that naturally. The second type of stacking, which is in many cases what employers are looking for, is horizontal stacking. And so this is kind of combining multiple credentials to qualify for specific jobs or specific occupations. And so in this example, rather than college issued credentials, I'm looking at industry recognized and third party issued credentials. So individuals looking to enter a computer networking may need a combination of certifications, CompTIA, Cisco, to be an IT systems administrator. So this idea that it isn't just a singular credential, that it may be a combination of multiple credentials that show that the student has demonstrated competency in these areas is important. And then the final example of stackability is what we call value-added stackability. And so this would be adding a specialized credential onto an existing degree for a targeted occupation. So the best example in Florida of this would be educator preparation. There are many individuals across the state who already have a bachelor's degree, let's say a bachelor's degree in biology. But for that person to be qualified to become a teacher, they need to obtain additional credentialing through educator preparation institutes to be able to sit for licensure and certification. And so value-added stacking, that's one example of you're taking something that somebody already has, but adding on to it so they're able to qualify for something additional. And then the final, or the fourth piece of career pathways elements is work-based learning. And this is obviously intrinsically connected to the workforce component because it does require that the workforce employers are involved in the learning process. Florida has really great resources already through its work-based learning manual and the statewide work-based learning network through Zello that individuals across the state can take advantage of. It's really important when we talk about work-based learning that we understand the breadth of work-based learning. So that includes really kind of early career awareness. And so in Florida, we have middle school opportunities for students to be exposed to different industries that maybe they didn't think about. And so work-based learning can include career awareness. It can also include kind of what we traditionally would think about with work-based learning, internships or clinicals, opportunities where students have a seat within a local employer, so they're being trained on the job. There may be opportunities for things like apprenticeship or pre-apprenticeship programs. And work-based learning can also include things like practicums and service projects. So there really is a breadth of opportunities for students to get exposure to real-world experiences that deepen their knowledge of those foundational kind of technical training that they would receive in education. And so those are some of the resources that Florida has already with the work-based learning. And then the final element of career pathways is support services. And so this one is just as important as the others. The idea that in recognizing and meeting students where they are, and not just students, but learners, participants, individuals who might be in the workforce system, who maybe aren't thinking about a traditional college education, but would be interested in short-term boot camps that would allow them to attain a certification. And so the idea here is that career pathways also includes all of that workforce component, stackable credentials, but it also includes the non-academic supports that students need to be successful and to enroll in a training program or an education program. So the idea that individuals are made aware of things like childcare and transportation, housing assistance, that mental health and counseling services, they are aware of opportunities to take advantage of those types of services. Skill development is really important. And we know in talking with employers that there are a lot of skills that are still in need, particularly around employability skills, time management, communication. And so being able to support a student holistically so they have the technical training and they have the ability to walk on a job and be able to work with others, problem solve, critical thinking, that sort of thing. And then finally, elements of career pathways would include academic and career support. So we know that students are successful when they have access to outside of the classroom supports like tutoring, advising services, learning communities, the ability to have career navigation, be able to sit down with a career counselor to help map out what their opportunities are. So all 5 of those components work in concert to sort of make up what we know as career pathways and how we're defining them for our purposes. And so these last 2 slides are a reflection of what we learned through the baseline assessment that we conducted. And so in looking at all of the information, and you saw a snapshot of it just a moment ago, is Florida Career Pathways ecosystem has become increasingly more complex as the state has made investments. There has been a lot of policy and a lot of initiatives to align education and workforce. And those are really great things. The state of Florida has a goal to be #1 in workforce education, and it has made substantial investments to do that. At the same time, that also increases the complexity. You know, folks may not have a full understanding of all of the different supports and how different programs can work in concert with each other. Another thing that we noted in our review is that having a focus on the word college when we think about college access might be limiting when we think about all of the opportunities that exist for students and workforce participants out there. And so in talking with employers, sometimes they say, well, if I hear the word college, I know that that's not necessarily for me because I need my workers to have technical training. And what we would emphasize is really when we're talking about high value pathways, we're talking about pathways that go beyond a high school diploma. So post-secondary of some sort. So that could be industry certifications, short-term non-credit training, certificates, associate degrees. So really trying to recognize kind of how the employer perceives the word college, and also kind of the breadth of what does it mean to be successful in post-secondary, and knowing that in some cases certifications are just as important as degrees. And all of those things can be true. We also noted, and this was said at the beginning, that there are different definitions of career pathways. And so sometimes that term is used to describe a specific program. So there's a career pathway in nursing, and sometimes career pathways is used to reference a comprehensive system. So there are career pathways across Florida's 17 career clusters. And so part of what we see is there could be variations in definition and understanding of what career pathways are. And then the last, which I mentioned earlier, is that there's so much data out there that organizations can really struggle to understand and make sense of it. And so for us, we kind of see that as an opportunity, and sort of moves on into my next, which is my last slide, which are the opportunities that we see within the career pathways landscape, within the Florida landscape. And so we found that Florida has a significant infrastructure to support career pathways, and the investments that exist, the leadership that is being shown at a state and local level is extraordinary and getting us in the right direction. We also see an opportunity for LCANs to be at the table in those regional conversations. And so one opportunity that we've identified is for FCAN to consider ways to strengthening LCAN capacity, whether that be through training, coaching, and peer learning, really to increase understanding of workforce policy. Sometimes workforce and education can exist in 2 silos, and breaking down those silos is important. But also making sure that LCANs are at the table for cross-sector partnerships, that LCANs have access to labor market data, and that they're able to use those data as we think about advising students into high-value pathways. the role that LCANs play currently, I think, can be just strengthened when you think about their career pathways and the work that LCANs currently do between linking career K-12, post-secondary workforce, and community partners. And so part of this is identifying state policy and funding priorities that exist that can serve to incentivize more work in this space. We definitely see an opportunity to bring some clarity to what we mean when we say career pathways, having consistent definition, bringing more access to how do you actually take all of the data sets that are out there and make sense of it. And EPCAN does really great in this space already with its attainment work. And then the last piece, which I think leads into Kimberly Krupa's portion, is to identify and amplify high impact regional models. So we know that there is an incredible amount of work done at the state level. We also know locally is where a lot of the rubber meets the road when it comes to career pathways. And so we see an opportunity to really identify and amplify those models that are working well, and then thinking about scaling them across different communities. And so that kind of concludes the high-level overview of the baseline assessment, and I will turn it back over to Dave.
Thank you, Carrie. Great stuff. So useful for community leaders and practitioners to have this information to both undergird and clarify how they're doing the work in their communities for student and economic success. I did not. The question I saw in the Q&A is for Carrie, and it had to. The question was, "What is TANF?" And I was able to answer that. But maybe you could shed some light as to why TANF was listed as an entry point into career pathways.
Yeah, that's a great question. And so TANF is one, as Dave mentioned, temporary assistance for needy families. And so the idea that individuals who may be in need of short-term assistance to bridge a gap are able to receive public benefits to kind of offset a shortfall. Really, one of the features that Florida is moving in the direction with House Bill 1507, and some of you may have heard of the no wrong door policy. And the purpose behind the no wrong door policy is that individual Floridians, whether they are, trying to access benefits through the Department of Children and Families, whether they are at a local workforce board trying to figure out what jobs might be available, whether they present at a community college trying to identify enrollment opportunities. The idea behind no wrong door is those should all be entry points, that there is a recognition that all of the workforce, the support services, which include DCF, things like TANF and SNAP benefits, that all of that can lead back to education and training opportunities. And so the no wrong door policy, which is being implemented through the REACH office, is designed to really bring kind of a statewide cohesive approach to that. But I think I sort of mentioned it because I think it's important to think about when individuals are trying to access public benefits, what are some opportunities that can be referrals to help them think about upskilling and increasing opportunities for jobs?
Yeah, that's so important as we think about our SAIL to 60 goal and reaching our economic goals in the state. There really should be an opportunity for every Floridian, to participate in that post-secondary education and a rewarding career. I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to invite Kim Krupa to provide an overview of a very exciting initiative that is forthcoming and how communities can get involved in some of this pathways work and learn more about what is going on and how best to position learners in their communities for jobs in their communities. So Kim, take it away.
Thank you so much, Dave. It's humbling to follow two amazing speakers, but I know many of you have hung on the call and are much anticipating this. section of the webinar. So thank you for hanging in there. And this information will be critical to these next steps that we'll be introducing. So I'm Kim with the Florida College Access Network. We're so excited to talk to you about an incredible opportunity that could really transform career pathways in your region, leveraging some of the insights that were just shared. We know that many of you are already deeply engaged in college access and success work who are on this call. And today we wanted to introduce you to this competitive grant opportunity that aligns with FCAN's mission, the mission of our local college access networks, the work you're already doing or aspiring to do around career-connected learning and economic mobility. You'll see a QR code on this slide that will take you directly to the information page and all the resources we're going to discuss today, including the full baseline report that Dr. Henderson just shared. You can find at this link. So feel free to scan that now or anytime during our conversation, and I'll ask my colleagues to also put that link in the chat for you. So before we kick off, I just wanted to level set why this opportunity matters so much, not just for our communities, but really for our workforce and the students we collectively serve, those learners at the center, as Carrie showed in her pinwheel. And as Adriana showed, Florida's economy is growing and rapidly changing. Our state needs a skilled workforce to fill these high demand, high wage jobs at the same time. Something we grapple with every day. Working with our local communities, we have students in every region of our state who have the talent and the drive to succeed, but lack clear pathways into these career opportunities. And that is exactly what this grant opportunity, supported by our partners at Lumina Foundation, is designed to help LCANs build those pathways. And we're looking at this as a way to create a system where you can identify talent wherever it exists, provide students with the skills and credentials employers need, and then connect them to careers that offer that economic security and that upward mobility. So this opportunity is exclusive to our local college access networks, which, as you can see on this map, span the entire state. Each of these regions has unique economic strengths, industry clusters, and workforce needs, and they collectively serve the vast majority of our population across those 34 counties. So if you're on this call and thinking, I'm not sure which LCAN serves my area, or I'd like to get more involved with my LCAN, reach out to us. We'll connect you with your regional LCAN leader, but this opportunity is designed to be implemented through our local college access networks, because we know, as Dr. Henderson articulated, regional partnerships are essential to building these sustainable career pathways ecosystems. You can also find more information about each of these LCANs on the FCAN website. We have a blue banner at the top with a local college access network button, and they all have their own page on our website. So at a glance, here are the key details we wanted to share today. We will be awarding up to 6 grants of up to $50,000 per LCAN partnership. And the grant is designed over an 18-month project period. So kicking off in April and running through September 2027. We can see the purpose here that was just articulated. The application deadline is March 27th, right short of midnight. And there are a few requirements, including having a cross-sector regional partnership, which is the bread and butter of being an LCAN, but making sure explicitly that you've got workforce and employers at the table. A commitment to participate in our community of practice and technical assistance that will be a companion to this opportunity, not just the funding, but the support for implementation. And then a focus on changing the system. So not running a program or introducing some sort of intervention, but embedding pathways information into your local ecosystem. We're looking for projects that kind of span across these 3 buckets here: strengthening regional partnerships, expanding access and removing barriers, and aligning with your regional labor market needs. So for number 1, we want to see that you've convened, or you have a clear plan to convene and bring the right people to your tables. We want to see, in strong applications, we'll have evidence that these partners are engaged and that you've got concrete strategies for bringing them together. In terms of access and barriers, this is what we do in college access. But we really want to see how you're designing pathways that reach students where they are. If you've got rural areas, if you've got certain neighborhoods and communities across your region that you want to target, subpopulations that you want to bring to your tables, how will you ensure that those talented students have access to these opportunities? How will you remove financial, transportation, information barriers? And kind of how will you measure whether they're successfully expanding opportunity to students who haven't traditionally had those opportunities? And then alignment with your regional labor market. We will, of course, assist with this in our technical assistance, but your pathways really need to lead somewhere meaningful. And we want to see evidence that you've done your homework, and that you understand where the jobs are and will be, and that you're designing pathways that align with those opportunities. And a lot of the resources we're making available through this grant will help you pinpoint that information and inform your work. Okay, in the interest of time, just a quick screenshot. On the landing page for the information on this opportunity, these are the key dates to be aware of. Big headline here is February 18th. We will have our application information session, and the application will actually open on that same landing page that the QR code directed you to. We have already set up the Q&A sessions on the subsequent Wednesdays, and those links are also on that page. And of course, the grand finale is the March 27th application deadline. We're anticipating award notifications in early April and bringing the cohort together at our Talent Strong Florida Summit in Tampa on May 6th for a pre-summit session, for a summit that is actually 3 days. So schedule at a glance. And we just wanted to put together a quick slide on what you can do now. Again, that one-stop shop link will take you to all kinds of resources and need to knows that you can share with your partners. And we encourage you to explore that full opportunity. Also, those 2 links that Dr. Henderson shared, they're the full baseline assessment, and then links to the regional and industry profiles report that is a companion piece to the baseline assessment and breaks down the regional reports for every local college access network in Florida. So there are 4 pages for all 19 LCANs. I would start identifying partners and having those exploratory conversations, and some tips here on what to talk about and what to do with these partners in the next few weeks. Of course, register for the information session, and then plan to attend the companion Q&A sessions on February 24th and March 4th. We're also going to open up some technical assistance for a piece of the application that involves a self-assessment, because we know that can be hard to do. And so we're going to plan more sessions to help you navigate that. So FCAN is committed to supporting all of you through this process. We believe in the power of LCANs to drive this work, and we're excited to see what you'll propose. So Dave, I'll keep the screen up and turn it back to you to close us out.
Thank you. Thank you so much for that, Dr. Krupa. And several of the participants and viewers have asked that those links be posted in the chat. So if that could be done, that would be terrific. Thank you so much, Adriana, Carrie, and Kim, for your time and insights today. We've learned a lot. It's an exciting time to be involved in helping Florida meet all of its goals related to talent, its economy, and workforce. Before we go, and while we're getting those, there it is, added in the chat right there. I want to remind everyone that in addition to some deadlines related to this funding opportunity, we've got a registration deadline, early registration deadline for our Talent Strong Florida 2026 Summit. This Saturday, you got about 34 hours to get that done. Don't wait, don't tarry. Join us. We'll continue these conversations around education pathways and rewarding careers. So thank you all so much for your time, and have a great, great afternoon. Take care.